My parents forbade me from their 30th anniversary party. My mother called and told me seating was just too limited this year. She used her sweet, careful voice, the one she saves for breaking bad news without taking any of the blame. But hours later, I was sitting alone in my dark apartment, and my older brother posted a photo online. It showed a massive banquet table under golden chandeliers. The caption read, "Family only. Finally, everyone together." I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone. I just stared at their smiling faces. I hit like and commented, "Congrats! Mortgage and property taxes are all yours now." 5 minutes later, the post vanished completely. And then, 30 missed calls lit up my screen. They were about to lose everything, and the best part was, they brought it entirely on themselves. Before I tell you about the absolute ruins they left their own lives in, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Thank you for being here. Please grab a warm glass of water, sit down, and listen as I tell you the whole story. I am 32 years old, and my name is Matthew Carter. I work as a structural engineer in Albany, New York. I build things for a living. I spend my days analyzing load-bearing walls, calculating the exact tensile strength of steel beams, and making sure that when a massive storm hits the East Coast, the foundations of the commercial buildings I design do not crack. It is a job built entirely on logic, mathematics, and unwavering stability. It is ironic, really, because for my entire adult life, I was the sole structural support for a family that was completely rotten on the inside. That Saturday night, the night of the grand anniversary dinner, my apartment was completely silent. The only light in my living room came from the cold, blue glow of my smartphone screen resting on my cheap, second-hand coffee table. Outside my window, the Albany traffic hummed a low, steady rhythm. The rain was lightly tapping against the glass. I sat on my sofa, a half-eaten plate of cold pasta resting on my lap, and I watched my phone vibrate. The caller ID flashed my mother's name, Evelyn Carter. It vibrated for a full 30 seconds, shaking aggressively against the wood of the table. Then it stopped. A second later, it started again. This time, it was my brother, Elijah. Then my mother again. Then my Aunt Carol. The screen glowed bright, went dark, and lit up again in a frantic, desperate rhythm. I watched it happen with a strange, icy feeling settling deep in my chest. For 3 excruciating years, I had been paying their mortgage. Every single month, on the very first day of the month, a substantial portion of my hard-earned salary was automatically wired from my checking account to their primary bank account. I didn't just pay the base mortgage. I paid the exorbitant property taxes that came with living in their upscale suburban neighborhood. I paid the premium home insurance. I kept the roof over their heads, the heat running in the winter, and the perfectly manicured lawn green in the summer. I did it because I was conditioned to believe that this is what family does. I thought loyalty was a currency you could use to buy love. I thought that if I just provided enough, if I was just useful enough, they would finally look at me the way they looked at Elijah. I was incredibly, stupidly wrong. When the phone finally stopped ringing for a brief moment, a text message came through. It was from Elijah. The preview banner popped up at the top of my screen. "Don't take it personally. You know how Mom gets. Delete that comment right now before Dad sees it." My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. A thick blue vein throbbed hard against my right temple. Don't take it personally. Let me paint a picture of exactly what I was not supposed to take personally. Elijah typed those words from a high-end, exclusive steakhouse downtown. He was wearing a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He was drinking vintage champagne, eating dry-aged ribeye, and laughing with my aunts, uncles, and cousins. He was doing all of this at a table I was explicitly told I could not join because I didn't fit the aesthetic, paid for by the money our parents didn't have to spend on housing because I was footing the bill. He typed those incredibly condescending words while sitting at the center of a family gathering that my labor had subsidized. I picked up the phone. The metal casing felt cold against my palm. I didn't reply to his text. I didn't call my mother back to listen to her scream. I didn't try to justify myself. Instead, I minimized the messaging app and opened my mobile banking application. The app loaded, requiring my Face ID to log in. I stared at the screen, my own reflection staring back at me in the dark glass. I looked tired. The bags under my eyes were heavy from years of working 60-hour weeks just to ensure my parents never received a foreclosure notice. I navigated to the transfers page. I clicked on the tab labeled Scheduled and Recurring. There it was, the lifeline. The transaction was labeled Carter Residence Mortgage. The amount was $3,450, scheduled to be automatically deducted on the first of every month. It had been running like clockwork for 36 months. Over $120,000 of my money, poured into a house that I wasn't even welcome to visit on a holiday. I tapped the line item. A menu popped up from the bottom of the screen. Edit, pause, delete. I tapped delete. The app, designed to prevent accidental financial disasters, threw up a secondary warning prompt. A red exclamation point appeared on the screen. Are you sure you want to permanently delete this recurring transfer? This action cannot be undone. I stared at the prompt. My thumb hovered over the glowing screen. I knew exactly what this meant. If I did this, there was no going back. I wasn't just burning a bridge. I was strapping dynamite to the structural pillars and blowing it to absolute pieces. My mother would be humiliated when the bank called. Elijah would have to actually contribute. My father would have to wake up from his deliberate ignorance. I pressed confirm. The screen refreshed. A little green checkmark appeared. Recurring transfer successfully deleted. For the first time in my entire adult life, I felt a massive, crushing weight physically lift off my shoulders. The air in my apartment suddenly felt easier to breathe. I locked the phone, tossed it onto the sofa cushion next to me, and walked into my kitchen to pour a glass of bourbon. The phone started ringing again, buzzing violently against the fabric of the couch. I ignored it. I took a slow sip of my drink, feeling the burn in the back of my throat. The financial umbilical cord was officially severed. But to understand why I did it, why I cut off my own flesh and blood with a single tap on a screen without a shred of guilt, you have to understand the price I paid just to be allowed in their lives. You have to understand the decades of quiet, normalized cruelty that built up to that single comment on a Saturday night. Growing up in the Carter household meant learning the rules of a rigged game very early on. Elijah was the golden child. He was 3 years older than me, louder, drastically more handsome, and endlessly charming. He had a way of walking into a room and making everyone look at him. My mother, Evelyn, worshipped the ground he walked on. If Elijah brought home a mediocre grade on a history test, my mother would quickly praise his effort. "He is so creative, Robert," she would tell my father over dinner, defending a C-. Traditional public schooling just doesn't capture his genius. He's a visionary. If I brought home straight A's and a blue ribbon from the regional science fair, the certificate was quickly reviewed, offered a brief nod, and slid into a kitchen drawer before the neighbors could see it. "Don't brag, Matthew," my mother would say, not even looking up from washing the dishes. "Nobody likes a show-off. It makes other people feel bad about themselves." My father, Robert, was essentially a ghost haunting his own home. He worked in middle management at an insurance firm, he read his newspaper, and he avoided conflict at all costs. His entire philosophy of fatherhood was keeping the peace with his wife. Whenever I tried to show him a wooden bridge model I built, or talk to him about the math club, he would give a quick, nervous nod. "That's nice, son. Very sturdy. Go show your mother." But my mother never had the time. Her eyes were always fixed firmly on whatever Elijah was doing. I vividly remember my grandfather's funeral when I was 15 years old. It was a bleak, freezing, rainy afternoon in late November. I stood by the graveside shivering in a cheap, ill-fitting suit we had bought off the clearance rack at a discount department store. Elijah, who was 18 at the time and preparing for college, was wearing a brand-new, tailored wool peacoat my mother had bought him specifically for the occasion. My mother spent the entire 2-hour service holding Elijah's arm, leaning on him for physical support, presenting him to the extended family as the strong man of the house. I stood a few feet away, entirely invisible, holding a black umbrella over myself. My Aunt Carol walked past me, patted Elijah's shoulder affectionately, and then looked at me. She whispered loudly to my mother, "Elijah is such a pillar of strength today, Evelyn. Matthew is just so stiff, isn't he? No emotion at all. It's unsettling." I heard every single word. I swallowed the thick, painful lump in my throat and looked down at my scuffed dress shoes sinking into the wet mud. That was the exact day I realized my core fear. I was fundamentally unlovable to these people unless I could provide something they desperately needed. I was an accessory. Elijah was the main character. When it came time for higher education, the disparity became financial. Elijah went off to an expensive, out-of-state private university to study communications. My parents completely drained their savings and dipped heavily into the college fund they had supposedly meant for both of us just to cover his first 2 years of tuition and his fraternity dues. When my turn came 3 years later, the accounts were empty. I went to a local state engineering college on a partial academic scholarship and worked night shifts at a hardware store just to cover my rent and textbooks. I didn't complain. I told myself I was building character. I told myself that hard work and independence would eventually earn their respect. Then came the spectacular era of Elijah's failures. He graduated with a useless degree, married a woman he had known for 6 months, maxed out joint credit cards to fund a lavish lifestyle he couldn't afford, and ended up in a messy, incredibly aggressive divorce. The custody battle over their golden retriever alone cost nearly $20,000 in legal fees. Elijah lost his entry-level marketing job, lost his wife, and was evicted from his luxury apartment. So the golden boy came home. He drove his leased BMW up the driveway, carrying nothing but a bruised ego and 4 suitcases of designer clothes. I remember the Sunday I went to visit them right after he moved back into his childhood bedroom. The house smelled of expensive roast beef, Elijah's favorite meal. My mother was practically buzzing with nervous energy, setting the formal dining room table with the good china that usually only came out for Thanksgiving. "Elijah is just going through a difficult transition phase," she told me in the kitchen, aggressively scrubbing a perfectly clean pot in the sink. "He needs his family right now, Matthew. The world has been very cruel to him. We all need to wrap our arms around him and support him." "I heard about the divorce," I said quietly, leaning against the counter. "Is he looking for work? I know a few guys in sales who might be hiring." My mother spun around, her eyes flashing with sudden, irrational anger. "He is healing, Matthew. Not everything is about money and schedules and your rigid little corporate world. You have absolutely no empathy. You've always been so cold." I stepped back, physically stung by the venom in her voice. I was working 60-hour weeks at an entry-level engineering firm, sharing a cramped, unheated apartment with 2 roommates, eating boiled pasta 5 nights a week just to aggressively pay off my student loans. But I was the cold one. Elijah walked into the kitchen right at that moment, looking perfectly rested and smelling of expensive cologne. He grabbed a green apple from the counter, tossed it in the air, and patted my shoulder patronizingly. "Hey, little bro, good to see you. Nice shirt. Is that from a thrift store?" He chuckled, taking a loud bite of the apple. My father walked in, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and retreated to the living room to watch golf without saying a single word to either of us. That was the established dynamic. Elijah took up all the oxygen in the room. My mother guarded him like a rabid dog protecting her pup. My father pretended he was deaf and blind, and I paid the emotional admission fee just to stand in the room. The admission fee transitioned from emotional to financial a few years later. I had finally secured a major promotion at my engineering firm, bumping me up to a senior structural role. My salary jumped significantly. I moved into a decent, secure apartment in Albany, bought a reliable truck, and started putting real money into a retirement account. For a brief, incredibly naive moment, I thought I had finally made it. I thought my parents would look at my stability and be proud. Instead, my promotion became their permanent safety net. It started relatively small. My father needed a sudden dental surgery that their bare-bones insurance didn't fully cover. My mother called me, her voice trembling with manufactured panic. Matthew, we just don't have the cash on hand. Your brother is still finding his footing with his new business idea. Could you help us out? Just this once? We are desperate. I wired the money the exact same day, for $1,000. A week later, my mother called to complain about the pain medication the dentist prescribed, but she never actually said the words, "Thank you." 2 months later, the transmission on my mother's SUV blew out. Another frantic phone call. Another wire transfer of $2,000. Then the catastrophic event hit. My father was forced into early retirement due to corporate downsizing at his insurance firm. Their monthly income plummeted overnight. My mother called me on a Tuesday evening. I was still at the office, hovering over a massive blueprint. "Matthew," she said, and I could hear her pacing furiously on the hardwood floor of their hallway. "We are going to lose the house." I stopped marking the blueprint. My blood ran cold. "What do you mean, lose the house? What about Dad's severance package? What about the savings?" "It's gone," she snapped, her voice defensive. "Things are expensive. Elijah had some lingering legal fees from the divorce, and we had to help him clear his name. Now the bank is threatening foreclosure. You make excellent money now. You have that big salary. You need to step up and do your part for this family." She didn't ask. She demanded. I sat at my desk, looking out at the glittering city lights of Albany. This was my childhood home, the house where I grew up, the house they had casually promised would be our inheritance one day, even though I knew Elijah would demand the lion's share. "How much is the mortgage?" I asked, defeated. She told me. It was nearly a third of my monthly take-home pay. "I'll cover it," I said, my voice barely a whisper in the empty office. "Set it up so it auto-drafts from my checking account." "Oh, Matthew," she breathed, her tone shifting instantly from hostile panic to sweet, suffocating relief. "You are such a good boy. We always knew we could count on you. This is what family is all about. Sacrifice. That was the trap, and I walked right into it. For 3 years, I paid that mortgage, and in return, I was treated like a broken ATM machine. My mother never kept score of my payments, but she certainly kept a meticulous ledger of my perceived social flaws. Whenever I visited, she would critique my clothes, my lack of a wife, and my quiet demeanor. I was a walking wallet, tolerated but never truly wanted. The illusion finally, permanently shattered exactly 1 week before their 30th anniversary. I was sitting in my truck, eating a deli sandwich during my lunch break, when my mother called. She sounded upbeat, almost aggressively cheerful. That was always the biggest red flag. "Matthew, honey, how is work? Still building those big buildings?" she asked, a fake lilt in her voice. "Yes, Mom. Work is fine. We are pouring concrete today." "What's going on?" I asked, putting the sandwich down on the dashboard. "Well, I'm calling about the anniversary dinner next Saturday at the Capitol Grill. Dad and I were looking at the finalized guest list, and the restaurant management is just being so incredibly difficult about the seating arrangements. They have a very strict fire code, you know?" My stomach tightened into a hard knot. I knew exactly where this was going, but I forced her to say it out loud. "Okay, and well, Aunt Carol is bringing her new husband, and Elijah's new girlfriend is coming, and a few of Dad's old colleagues RSVP'd late. We are just completely out of chairs at the main banquet table." She paused, leaving a heavy silence, waiting for me to graciously volunteer to step aside. When I stayed completely silent, she pushed on, her tone hardening just a fraction. "So, we thought, since you are always so busy with work anyway, and you don't really like big crowds or fancy dressing up, you wouldn't mind sitting this one out? We can have a quiet lunch, just the 3 of us, next month. My treat." I gripped the steering wheel. The leather squeaked under my knuckles. I was paying for the roof over her head. I was the reason they weren't living in a cramped apartment. And she was literally cutting me from the guest list to make room for Aunt Carol's new husband, a man she had met 6 months ago. "You're uninviting me from your 30th anniversary party," I stated flatly, stripping away the sugar coating. "Don't use that ugly word, Matthew," she scolded. her tone dropping its sweet edge instantly. "Nobody is uninviting you. We are just managing a logistical issue. You always make things so difficult and dramatic. Why can't you just be understanding like your brother?" Elijah completely agreed this was the best solution for everyone. Of course he did. Elijah didn't want the guy paying his rent sitting across the table, reminding him of his own pathetic failures just by existing in his peripheral vision. "Fine," I said. My voice was completely hollow, devoid of any warmth or anger. "Have a great dinner." I hung up before she could say another word. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my Aunt Carol. "Your mother told me you're too busy with work to come to the anniversary. Always chasing that salary, Matthew. You should prioritize family more before it's too late." I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. I didn't reply. My chest felt like it was caving in under the weight of a collapsed concrete slab. The rejection wasn't just painful. It was profoundly humiliating. I was good enough to fund their lifestyle in the shadows, but not good enough to be seen in public with them under the bright lights. That evening, I couldn't focus at work. I sat at my drafting table, staring blankly at a CAD model on my screen. My coworker, Sarah, noticed. Sarah was a senior project manager, sharp, observant, and brutally honest. We had worked together for 4 years, and she was the only person who knew a bit about my family's financial drain on me. "You look like somebody kicked your dog," she said, leaning against the glass wall of my cubicle. "What's going on?" I rubbed my eyes. I needed to say it out loud just to make sure I wasn't losing my grip on reality. "My parents are having a massive 30th anniversary dinner this weekend. They uninvited me today. Said there wasn't enough seating." Sarah's eyebrows shot up to her hairline. "The same parents whose $3,000 mortgage you pay every single month?" "Yes." She didn't offer fake sympathy. She didn't pat my shoulder or tell me it would be okay. She just looked at me with deep, piercing, pitying eyes. "Matthew," she said softly, crossing her arms, "why do you keep doing this to yourself? They're my family, Sarah. If I don't pay it, they literally lose the house." Sarah shook her head. She pulled up a rolling chair and sat down close to me. "Listen to me very carefully. They do not respect you. They do not appreciate you. You are not their son. You are their landlord, and they are terrible, abusive tenants." I tried to defend them purely out of habit. "It's complicated. Elijah has always been the favorite. I just thought if I took care of them, they would eventually see." "See what?" Sarah cut me off, her voice firm and unwavering. "See your value? Matthew, they see your value every time they check their bank balance. They just don't value you. They only love the version of you that pays the bills. The minute you stop paying, you'll see exactly who they really are. They only love the version of you that pays the bills." The words hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. It was the absolute, undeniable, horrifying truth. I had spent my entire life trying to buy a seat at a table that was never built for me. I had sacrificed my own future, my own peace of mind, to fund their grand illusion of suburban perfection. That was the conversation that primed the bomb. And Elijah's photo 3 days later was the spark that ignited it. After I deleted the auto-transfer that Saturday night, the first week of silence was intoxicating. I woke up, went to work, and came home. I didn't check my family group chat. I didn't answer unknown numbers. For the first time, my paycheck belonged entirely to me. But reality has a funny way of catching up, usually with interest. 2 weeks after the anniversary dinner, the mortgage payment was officially marked as missed. My mother, who had aggressively ignored my existence since my comment on Elijah's photo, suddenly found the time to reach out. I was sitting on my couch watching a baseball game on a Tuesday night when my phone lit up. "Matthew, the bank just called Dad. They said the payment didn't go through. Is there an issue with your account? Please fix this immediately. It is urgent." I read the message. I read it again. There was no apology for excluding me. There was no question about my well-being or why I had been utterly silent for 14 days. Just a demand for service. She used the word urgent in all caps to trigger my childhood anxiety. a tactic she had perfected over decades. I didn't reply. I swiped the notification away and watched the pitcher throw a strike. The next morning, Elijah took the fight to social media. I didn't follow him anymore, but a mutual cousin sent me a screenshot. Elijah had posted a long, dramatic, poorly punctuated status on Facebook. It breaks my heart how money changes people. Some folks get a little bit of success and a decent salary, and suddenly they forget the people who raised them and sacrificed everything for them. Family should be unconditional, not transactional. Praying for certain people to find their moral compass before they end up completely alone. The comments below it were sickening. Aunt Carol wrote, "Stay strong, Elijah. You are the glue of that family. God sees the truth." Another cousin chimed in, "So sad when people become arrogant and cold just because they have a little cash." I laughed out loud in my kitchen. It was a harsh, bitter, echoing sound. Elijah, a man who had not paid a single utility bill in his own home for years, a man whose divorce was funded by his parents' ruined retirement, was lecturing me on morality to an audience of enablers. They were spinning a narrative where I was the villain, the greedy, cold-hearted son who abandoned his poor, elderly parents out of spite. Let them talk, I thought. Words on Facebook don't pay the bank. I maintained my absolute, stony silence. I refused to engage in their drama. I was done playing their game. But 3 days later, the real storm hit. A thick, official-looking envelope arrived in my locked mailbox. The return address was from the primary lending branch of my bank, the same bank that held my checking account and my parents' mortgage. I frowned as I pulled it out. It didn't make sense. I paid my credit cards in full every month. My auto loan was current. I walked into my kitchen, grabbed a steak knife, and sliced the heavy paper envelope open. I pulled out a thick stack of stapled legal documents. The header at the top of the first page, printed in bold, aggressive black ink, read, "Notice of refinance and guarantor obligation." My eyes scanned the dense legal text. My heart began to pound a heavy, terrifying rhythm against my ribs. The document outlined a massive refinance agreement on my parents' property. They had pulled out a staggering amount of equity, over $150,000 in cash. But that wasn't the part that made my blood run cold. Under the section labeled Primary Borrower and Guarantor, my name was printed in bold letters, Matthew Carter. I dropped the papers on the kitchen counter. My hands were shaking so violently I couldn't hold them steady. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "No, no, no." I leaned over the granite counter, reading the numbers again, my vision blurring. The new monthly payment was astronomical. The terms were incredibly aggressive. And according to this legally binding document, I was entirely legally responsible for the debt. If the mortgage defaulted, they wouldn't just take my parents' house. They would come after my salary. They would come after my truck. They would drain my savings, ruin my credit score, and destroy my financial future for the next 20 years. I had never signed a single piece of paper. I had never spoken to a loan officer. I had never authorized a refinance. A cold, clammy sweat broke out across my forehead. My parents hadn't just used me. They had stolen my identity to plunge me into a massive, crippling debt. The anger I felt in that moment wasn't hot and explosive. It was freezing cold. It was the horrifying realization that the people who gave me life were perfectly willing to completely destroy mine just to save themselves. The next morning, I took an emergency personal day from work. At 9 a.m. sharp, I called the phone number listed on the bank documents. I navigated through the endless automated menus, my jaw set, my knuckles turning white as I gripped the phone. Finally, I was connected to a senior account manager named Ethan Davis. "Mr. Carter," Ethan said smoothly, his voice echoing slightly over the headset. "I see the file here. A cash-out refinance completed 3 weeks ago on the Albany property. How can I help you today?" "I didn't authorize this," I said. My voice was dangerously calm. It didn't sound like me. It sounded like a stranger. "I never signed a single document. I never agreed to be a guarantor on a new loan. This is fraud." There was a long pause on the line. I heard the rapid clatter of a keyboard. "Mr. Carter, I am looking at the e-notary logs right now," Ethan said, his professional tone dropping slightly into cautious territory. "The documents were digitally signed using your verified email address, and the identity verification passed using a high-resolution scan of your state-issued driver's license. The IP address logged during the signing matches a recognized device history on your banking profile." My mind raced. How could they have my ID? How could they have my email? Then it hit me like a swinging steel beam. 5 years ago, when I first started helping my father with his medical bills, I set up a joint checking account to make transfers easier. I had created a dedicated, separate email address for those bank notifications and given my parents the password so they could check the balance themselves without calling me. I had also left an old photocopy of my driver's license in my childhood bedroom desk for a background check years prior. I had given them the keys to my identity out of pure trust. They had weaponized that trust to forge my signature through an automated online portal. "Ethan," I said, gripping the edge of my kitchen counter so hard my fingers ached, "I am telling you, I did not sign this. Someone in my family used old credentials to bypass the e-notary system. Can you tell me where the cash-out funds were transferred?" "Sir, I cannot disclose specific routing details over the phone without a formal fraud investigation," Ethan replied carefully. "But I can confirm the funds were disbursed to an external business checking account, not to the property owners directly. An external business account. Elijah's fake consulting company." It all made perfect, sickening sense. Elijah needed money for his failing business or his massive debts. He convinced my mother to leverage the house. But they didn't have the credit score or the income to qualify for a cash-out refinance on their own. So they used the son who did. They stole my name, forged my signature, took the cash, and expected me to just keep paying the new, massive monthly bill without ever noticing the difference, assuming the auto draft would just increase and I wouldn't check the statements. "Mr. Davis," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "I need you to freeze that account immediately. I am filing a formal police report for identity theft and wire fraud." "Understood, Mr. Carter. I will initiate the fraud protocol on our end immediately." Ethan paused. "For what it's worth, sir, I'm very sorry." I hung up the phone. I didn't feel panic anymore. I felt a terrifying, absolute clarity. They had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. I didn't waste another minute. I took a quick shower, put on a sharp charcoal suit, the kind Elijah liked to wear to play pretend businessman, and drove straight to the downtown office of Clark Benson. Clark was a real estate and financial litigation lawyer I had met through my engineering firm. He had a reputation in Albany for being ruthless, meticulous, and entirely devoid of sentimentality. He was exactly the weapon I needed. I sat in his mahogany-paneled office, the air smelling of old paper and expensive leather, and laid the thick envelope of bank documents on his massive desk. I explained everything from the beginning: the history of payments, the missed dinner, the forged e-notary, and the external business account. Clark listened in total, unbroken silence, steepling his fingers under his chin. When I finished, he picked up the document, adjusted his glasses, and scanned the guarantor page. "This is a federal crime, Matthew," Clark said flatly, tossing the paper back onto the desk. "Wire fraud, identity theft, and bank fraud. The moment we file the injunction, the bank's internal fraud department will rip your family's finances apart. The police will get involved. We are talking about potential felony charges, primarily for whoever initiated the electronic signatures." "Elijah," I said without hesitation. "My brother. My parents barely know how to attach a PDF to an email, let alone bypass a secure e-notary system. Elijah orchestrated the digital forgery. My mother probably supplied the physical ID scan and the old passwords." Clark looked at me over the rim of his glasses, his expression grave. "Are you prepared for the fallout? This isn't a family argument anymore. If we pull this trigger, your brother could face real prison time. Your parents will absolutely lose the house to foreclosure because they cannot afford the new terms. There is no putting the genie back in the bottle. Once I file this, they are dead to you legally and personally. I looked out the window of his office. I thought about the 30 missed calls. I thought about Aunt Carol's text. I thought about Elijah sitting in a tailored suit, drinking champagne at a table I paid for, typing "Don't take it personally." They didn't care if I ended up completely bankrupt. They didn't care if my future, my potential family, my entire life was destroyed just so Elijah could play pretend. Why should I sacrifice my life to protect criminals just because we shared the same last name? "Pull the trigger, Clark," I said, my voice steady as stone. "I want my name off that loan, and I want them to face every single consequence of their actions." "Good," Clark said, opening a yellow legal pad and pulling out a pen. "First, we need to gather all written communications. Any texts, emails, or voicemails that prove they knew you were unaware of the refinance, or that they were desperate for money prior to the signature date." I spent the entire weekend digging through my digital history. I bought a thick, red legal folder and started printing everything. I printed the bank statements showing 3 years of my consistent payments, proving I was the sole financial support for the property. I printed the email from the bank confirming the IP address of the fraudulent signature, which, as Clark's private investigator later confirmed, traced directly back to my parents' home Wi-Fi router. But the final nail in the coffin was an audio file. I plugged my phone into my laptop and scrolled back through months of saved voicemails. I was looking for something specific, a memory that had been nagging at the back of my mind since the bank called. Finally, I found it. A voicemail from my mother, dated 6 weeks ago, right around the exact time the refinance application was secretly submitted. I hit play. The audio filled my quiet apartment. "Matthew, pick up the phone. Look, Elijah has an incredible business opportunity, but he needs capital right now. Dad and I want to help him, but our credit is tied up. You have perfect credit. We need you to co-sign a loan against the house. It's perfectly safe, Elijah promises. Call me back immediately. Family helps family, Matthew. Don't be selfish." I had ignored that voicemail at the time, dismissing it as another one of her ridiculous, dramatic demands for Elijah's benefit. I had never replied. And because I never replied, because I didn't give them permission, they decided to take matters into their own hands. They stole it. I saved the audio file onto a flash drive and dropped it into the red folder. I looked at the stack of evidence sitting on my dining table. It was a complete, clinical autopsy of my family's morality. The red folder held the absolute proof of their lies, their manipulation, and their ultimate betrayal. My phone buzzed on the table next to the folder. A text message from my mother. "Matthew, this silent treatment is childish. The bank is threatening us with late fees. Meet us at the downtown cafe tomorrow at 10 a.m. Elijah will be there too. We need to figure out how you are going to fix this mess. Don't embarrass us by not showing up." I picked up the phone. I didn't feel a shred of anxiety. I didn't feel the old childhood fear of her anger. I felt a cold, hard anticipation. "I'll be there," I typed back. I closed the red folder. The storm was fully formed, the trap was set, and tomorrow, I was going to let it tear their entire world apart. The downtown cafe my mother chose for our meeting was one of those overpriced, aggressively trendy spots that she loved. It had exposed brick walls, hanging industrial Edison bulbs, and baristas who looked like they were auditioning for a runway show. It was the kind of place where people went to be seen, which told me everything I needed to know about her mindset. She wasn't there to have a private, difficult family conversation. She was there to put on a public performance. She wanted to be in a location where I would be forced to keep my voice down, to mind my manners, and to avoid making a scene. She was relying on the social contract to keep me compliant. I arrived exactly at 10 a.m. The air outside was brisk, carrying that sharp, biting Albany wind that signals the absolute end of autumn. I walked through the heavy glass doors, the little brass bell chiming above my head. I didn't take off my coat. I carried the thick red legal folder in my left hand, gripping it so tightly my knuckles were stark white. I spotted them immediately. They were sitting at a small, round table near the large front window, perfectly illuminated by the morning sun. My mother was wearing a pristine beige cashmere sweater, her hair perfectly styled, looking every bit the affluent suburban matriarch she pretended to be. Across from her sat Elijah. He was wearing a designer leather jacket and aviator sunglasses resting casually on top of his head. He was leaning back in his chair, typing rapidly on his phone, looking utterly bored. My father was not there. That didn't surprise me. Robert Carter always conveniently found a reason to be absent when the actual dirty work of family conflict needed to be done. He preferred to hide in the basement and wait for the dust to settle, maintaining his absolute deniability. I walked over to the table. Elijah didn't even look up from his screen. My mother, however, plastered on a bright, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Matthew, honey, you made it," she said, gesturing to the empty iron chair between them. "Sit down. Let me buy you a cappuccino. You look exhausted. Are you sleeping well?" I didn't sit down immediately. I looked at the empty chair, then at her, and finally dropped the red folder onto the center of the small wooden table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud that made Elijah physically jump and drop his phone onto his lap. "I don't want coffee," I said. My voice was perfectly level. It wasn't loud, but it carried a cold, metallic edge that I had never heard from myself before. I pulled the chair out and sat down, keeping my posture rigid. Elijah picked up his phone, glaring at me. "Look who finally decided to join the real world," he scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest. "You know, ignoring Mom's texts for 3 weeks is incredibly childish, Matt. Even for you." She was worried sick. "You have a good salary now, a nice promotion, and suddenly you think you can just ghost the people who gave you everything." I stared at him. I looked at his expensive jacket, funded by the equity stolen from my name. I looked at the smug, entitled expression on his face, the face of a man who had never faced a single real consequence in his entire 35 years on this earth. "Elijah," I said quietly, "shut your mouth." His eyes widened. He sat up straight, his jaw dropping slightly. In 32 years, I had never spoken to him like that. My mother gasped, a sharp, dramatic intake of air, and immediately reached across the table to put a protective hand on Elijah's arm. "Matthew Carter, do not speak to your brother that way," she hissed, her voice dropping to an angry whisper to avoid drawing the attention of the next table. "We are in public. We came here to solve a problem, not to throw tantrums. Now, the bank is being completely unreasonable. They are claiming a missed payment and threatening to add exorbitant late fees to the new balance. You need to call them today, apologize for the delay, and arrange a wire transfer from your checking account to cover the new monthly premium." She said it with such casual authority. She truly believed that after everything, after the ultimate betrayal, she could simply issue an order and I would fall right back into line. She thought the conditioning was permanent. "I'm not calling the bank to pay the premium," I said, leaning forward slightly. "I'm not paying another dime toward that house. Ever." My mother's face hardened. The fake smile vanished completely, replaced by a look of sheer, venomous resentment. "Matthew, you listen to me. This is not a negotiation. You co-signed that refinance. Your name is on the guarantor line. If you don't pay it, they will ruin your credit and they will take our home. You will not destroy this family just because your feelings were hurt over a dinner invitation." "My feelings aren't hurt over a dinner," I replied. I reached out and flipped open the cover of the red folder. "My feelings are entirely irrelevant. We are dealing with facts now." I slid the first document across the table. It was the printed email from Ethan Davis, the bank manager, detailing the IP address trace of the digital e-notary signature. "That," I said, pointing to the highlighted numbers, "is the IP address of the device used to digitally sign the refinance paperwork. My lawyer hired a private investigator to trace it. It comes back to the exact router in your living room. The paperwork was signed on a Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m., a Tuesday when I was physically standing on a construction site in downtown Albany, surrounded by 20 witnesses and logged into a secure corporate network." Elijah shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He looked at the paper, then quickly looked out the window. "IP addresses can be spoofed," he muttered defensively. Hackers do it all the time. You probably got hacked. Really? I asked, pulling out the second document. Did hackers also use the high-resolution scan of my driver's license that I left in my childhood bedroom desk 5 years ago? Because that is the exact image file the bank has on record for the identity verification. My mother's hands dropped into her lap. The color began to slowly drain from her face, leaving her pale and drawn. I pulled out the third document. It was a printed spreadsheet of the external business account routing numbers where the $150,000 of cash-out equity had been wired. The bank confirmed the funds weren't used to fix the roof or update the kitchen. I continued, my voice gaining momentum, hammering each word like a nail into a coffin. The funds were wired directly into an LLC registered under Elijah's name. The same LLC that has been hemorrhaging money for 2 years. You stole my identity, forged my signature, and leveraged a massive federal bank loan under my name so Elijah could pay off his secret debts and buy a new leather jacket. We didn't steal anything, my mother suddenly hissed, leaning over the table, her eyes wide and frantic. You left those passwords with us. You gave us access to that joint account. We only used the tools you gave us. And we were going to tell you. We were just waiting for Elijah's business to turn a profit, and then he was going to make the payments himself. It was a temporary bridge loan, Matthew. Family helps family. You committed felony wire fraud, I stated, completely ignoring her ridiculous justification. Then, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my smartphone. I navigated to my audio files, turned the volume all the way up, and placed the phone in the dead center of the table. I pressed play. The cafe was filled with the low hum of conversation and the grinding of espresso beans. But my mother's voice cut through the noise with crystal clarity. Matthew, pick up the phone. Look, Elijah has an incredible business opportunity, but he needs capital right now. Dad and I want to help him, but our credit is tied up. You have perfect credit. We need you to co-sign a loan against the house. It's perfectly safe, Elijah promises. Call me back immediately. Family helps family, Matthew. Don't be selfish. The audio file ended. The silence at our table was absolute, suffocating, and incredibly heavy. Elijah was staring at the phone like it was a live grenade. The smug arrogance was completely wiped from his face, replaced by genuine, unadulterated terror. He knew exactly what that recording meant. Proved premeditation. Proved they knew they needed my permission, didn't get it, and proceeded to forge the documents anyway. My mother was visibly trembling. Her perfectly manicured hands were shaking in her lap. She looked up at me, and for the very first time in my entire life, I did not see condescension or annoyance in her eyes. I saw fear. Matthew, she whispered, her voice cracking. Please, you don't understand the pressure we were under. Elijah was in trouble. Real trouble. Bad investments. We had to save him. We are your family. You used to be, I said, picking up my phone and sliding it back into my pocket. I slowly closed the red folder and pulled it back toward my chest. But right now, you are just a criminal who stole my identity. Elijah finally found his voice. It was high-pitched and panicked. What do you want, Matt? You want me to pay the monthly premium? Fine. I'll figure it out. I'll get a job. I'll make the payments. Just keep paying it for a few more months until I get on my feet, and I swear I'll take over the loan. Just don't make a big deal out of this. I looked at my older brother, the golden boy, the man who had been handed every single advantage, every ounce of love, every dollar of our parents' savings, and he was sitting there begging me to cover his crimes for just a little while longer. I didn't come here to negotiate a payment plan, Elijah, I said, standing up from the chair. I looked down at both of them. I came here to look you in the eye when I told you how this ends. My mother reached out, her fingers desperately grabbing the sleeve of my coat. Matthew, what did you do? I pulled my arm away from her grasp. Yesterday afternoon, my lawyer filed a formal injunction with the bank's fraud department. I also walked into the downtown precinct and filed a police report for identity theft, bank fraud, and wire fraud. I handed over the IP logs, the routing numbers, and that voicemail. Elijah's face went completely ashen. You went to the cops? Over family money? Are you insane? It's not family money, I corrected him sharply. It's a federal bank loan secured by my stolen signature. The bank has officially frozen the mortgage account and the LLC account where the funds were deposited. They are initiating foreclosure proceedings on the house immediately because the loan was obtained through fraudulent means. My mother let out a small, strangled cry. She covered her mouth with both hands, tears welling up in her eyes and spilling over her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. No, Matthew, please. The house. It's our home. Where will we go? You can't do this to us. I'm your mother. You stopped being a mother the day you decided my financial ruin was an acceptable price to pay to cover for his failures, I said, pointing a finger directly at Elijah. The bank will take the house. The police will issue a warrant for the digital forgery. You are going to lose absolutely everything, and you have nobody to blame but yourselves. I reached into my wallet, pulled out a crisp $20 bill, and tossed it onto the table next to my mother's untouched cappuccino. Coffee is on me, I said. I turned around and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard my mother start to sob loudly, a chaotic, messy sound that caused several people at the nearby tables to turn and stare. I heard Elijah yelling my name, demanding I come back, demanding I fix it. I didn't stop. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the freezing Albany wind. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the crisp, clean air. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear or anxiety. It was the adrenaline of absolute liberation. I had walked into that cafe carrying a lifetime of heavy, suffocating chains, and I was walking out completely free. The fallout was rapid, brutal, and entirely public. When you build your entire life on a foundation of lies and projected wealth, the collapse is spectacularly messy. Within 48 hours of my lawyer, Clark Benson, filing the injunction, the bank's internal fraud division moved with terrifying efficiency. The primary mortgage account was locked down. The external business account holding the stolen cash-out equity was frozen under federal anti-money laundering protocols pending the police investigation. A week later, the reality of the situation physically manifested on the front lawn of my childhood home. A man in a cheap suit arrived with a heavy wooden mallet and drove a large, brightly colored sign directly into the perfectly manicured grass my mother cherished so much. The sign read, "Foreclosure. Property of the bank." I didn't go see it myself. I didn't need to. The neighborhood gossip network did all the heavy lifting for me. Mrs. Miller, a woman who lived 2 doors down and had endured decades of my mother's condescending remarks at neighborhood block parties, took a high-resolution photo of the sign and posted it on her Facebook page with the caption, "So sad to see what happens when people live wildly beyond their means. Praying for the Carter family during their financial collapse." It was petty, it was cruel, and it was exactly the kind of public shaming my mother had spent her entire life trying to avoid. The perfect social media image she had curated for decades shattered into a million unrecoverable pieces overnight. Aunt Carol and the rest of the extended family, the same people who had praised Elijah as the glue of the family just weeks prior, suddenly went completely silent. Nobody offered them a loan. Nobody offered them a spare bedroom. Rats are always the first to flee a sinking ship. My phone, which had been blissfully quiet for a few days, suddenly became a war zone of desperate voicemails. I refused to answer a single one, but I listened to them and forwarded them directly to Clark to add to the legal file. The progression of my mother's voicemails was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Monday morning, "Matthew, please call me. We need to hire a lawyer to fight the bank, but our accounts are frozen. We need you to pay a retainer. You got us into this mess by going to the police. You need to get us out." Wednesday afternoon, "Matthew, the neighbors are staring at us. Mrs. Miller brought over a casserole and asked if we needed food stamps." It was the most humiliating moment of my life. How could you humiliate your own mother like this? Have you no shame? Friday night, Elijah is packing his bags. He says he has to leave the state to avoid the police detectives. He is crying, "Matthew, your brother is crying because of what you did. You are a monster. You are a cold, heartless monster, and I wish I had never given birth to you." I listened to that final voicemail sitting in my apartment, watching the rain streak down the window pane. I played it twice. I waited for the familiar sting of rejection, the heavy weight of guilt that had plagued my entire childhood. I waited for the desperate urge to call her back, apologize, and open my wallet to fix the pain I had supposedly caused. But nothing happened. I felt absolutely nothing. The emotional well had completely run dry. She had finally pushed me past the point of no return, into a state of absolute unbreakable apathy. She wasn't my mother anymore. She was just a frantic, toxic woman facing the consequences of her own terrible decisions. I deleted the voicemail. Then, I took my smartphone, popped the SIM card tray open with a paperclip, and pulled out the tiny plastic chip. I took a pair of heavy desk scissors and cut the SIM card directly in half. I threw the pieces into the trash can. The next day, I went to the carrier store, got a brand new phone number, and gave it to exactly 3 people. My boss, my coworker Sarah, and my lawyer, Clark. I updated my banking security, froze my credit with all 3 major bureaus, and effectively erased Matthew Carter from their world. Elijah did exactly what my mother said he would do. He tried to run. When the local police detectives showed up at the house to question him regarding the digital forgery and wire fraud, his bedroom was empty. He had taken his designer clothes, abandoned his leased luxury car in the driveway because he couldn't afford the gas to drive it, and caught a Greyhound bus heading west. It was a pathetic, cowardly exit for the golden boy. He didn't stay to help our parents pack. He didn't stay to face the music. He abandoned them exactly the way he had abandoned his ex-wife during his divorce. He left them holding the bag, without my monthly payments, and with their own meager savings drained by Elijah's previous demands. My parents couldn't even afford to hire a moving company. They had to rent a cheap U-Haul truck themselves. My father, a man who had spent his life avoiding hard work, severely injured his back trying to load their heavy antique dining table into the truck. 30 days after the cafe meeting, the bank officially repossessed the property. The locks were changed, the windows were boarded up, and the house I grew up in became just another distressed asset on a bank ledger. My parents were forced to move into a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex on the very edge of the city limits, miles away from their country club friends and their pristine suburban life. The storm had finally passed, leaving nothing but wreckage in its wake. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one tasked with cleaning it up. I stood on the shoreline, completely dry, watching their ship sink to the bottom of the ocean. 8 months later, I found myself standing in the middle of a spacious, sun-drenched living room, holding a paint roller dripping with eggshell white paint. I didn't live in Albany anymore. When the legal dust had finally started to settle, I realized that staying in the same city as the ghosts of my past was holding me back. I requested a transfer through my engineering firm to our regional office in Rochester, New York. It was a 3-hour drive away, close enough to maintain my professional network, but far enough away that I would never accidentally run into my Aunt Carol at a grocery store. The new apartment was incredible. It had high ceilings, exposed wooden beams, and massive windows that overlooked a quiet, tree-lined park. It was significantly more expensive than my old place, but without the $3,000 parasitic drain on my monthly salary, I could easily afford it. I was painting the walls myself. I had spent the weekend assembling brand new furniture that I picked out entirely for myself, not hand-me-downs or cheap thrift store finds. Every single object in this apartment belonged to me. Every dollar in my bank account belonged to me. The silence in the apartment wasn't heavy or oppressive anymore. It was a gift. It was the sound of absolute peace. There were no frantic phone calls demanding money. There were no passive-aggressive text messages critiquing my life choices. There was just the steady rhythm of my favorite jazz playlist playing softly on a Bluetooth speaker. My new phone buzzed on the kitchen island. I set the paint roller down, wiped my hands on a rag, and picked it up. It was Clark Benson. "Matthew," Clark's gravelly voice came through the speaker. "I have good news. Actually, I have great news. I just walked out of the judge's chambers." I leaned against the counter, staring out the window at the park. Tell me. The civil ruling is official. The judge reviewed the police report, the IP logs, and the audio recording. He granted our motion in full. Your name has been completely expunged from the fraudulent refinance loan. You hold zero financial liability for the debt, the late fees, or the foreclosure costs. Your credit score is completely protected and restored. I closed my eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. The massive, terrifying sword of Damocles that had been hanging over my financial future for nearly a year was finally, permanently removed. Thank you, Clark, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I really mean it. You saved my life. I just did my job, Matthew. You provided the ammunition, Clark replied. But there is a secondary update you should be aware of regarding the criminal side of things. I opened my eyes. What happened with Elijah? The local police finally caught up with him, Clark explained. He tried to open a new line of credit in Ohio using a fake social security number. It flagged in the system. They arrested him 2 days ago. Given the pending felony warrants here in New York for the wire fraud and identity theft regarding your case, he is currently sitting in a county jail waiting for extradition. He is looking at serious federal charges, Matthew. He won't be able to charm his way out of this one. He's looking at a minimum of 3 to 5 years. I absorbed the information. The golden boy, the untouchable favorite son, was sitting in a concrete cell wearing an orange jumpsuit. I didn't feel joy or triumph. I just felt a profound sense of justice. Actions finally had consequences. And my parents? I asked quietly. They filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy last week, Clark said, his tone devoid of pity. Without your income, and with the foreclosure permanently destroying their credit, they couldn't manage their existing debts. They are living in a low-income subsidized housing complex now. I heard through the grapevine that your father had to take a job as a nighttime security guard just to pay for their groceries. The image flashed in my mind. My mother, who used to mock people who shopped at discount stores, was now relying on government assistance. My father, who just wanted to sleep in his recliner, was walking cold parking lots at 2 a.m. They had sacrificed their faithful, hard-working son to save their toxic, criminal favorite, and they ended up losing absolutely everything in the process. Thank you for the update, Clark, I said. Send me the final invoice. I'll wire the funds today. Take care of yourself, Matthew. Enjoy Rochester. I hung up the phone. I walked over to a stack of cardboard boxes in the corner of the room that I hadn't unpacked yet. They contained old files, college textbooks, and miscellaneous paperwork from my old apartment. I opened the top box and started sorting through a manila folder. Near the bottom, tucked between an old lease agreement and a car manual, a small piece of heavy, cream-colored cardstock slipped out and fluttered to the hardwood floor. I picked it up. It was a beautifully embossed place card with elegant gold calligraphy. It read Matthew Carter. It was the seating card for the 30th anniversary dinner. My mother must have mailed it to me weeks before she officially uninvited me, and I had simply tossed it into a pile of mail and forgotten about it. I stared at my name written in shiny gold ink. This little piece of cardboard represented everything I had ever wanted. A place at the table. A recognized spot in the family. Acceptance. I ran my thumb over the raised lettering. I thought about the pain of that rejection. I thought about the years of financial abuse. I thought about the fact that forgiveness is a noble concept, but it doesn't mean you have to let the people who destroyed you back into your life. You can forgive a snake for biting you because it is in a snake's nature to bite, but you don't invite the snake back into your house. I walked over to the small paper shredder sitting under my new desk. I turned the machine on. It hummed to life. I held the Golden Place card over the slot, let go, and watched the metal teeth grab the paper and shred it into tiny, unrecognizable strips of confetti. The past was officially destroyed. The future was unwritten, and for the first time I held the pen. I am standing by the massive window of my Rochester apartment right now as I tell you this. I have a hot mug of black coffee in my hand. Outside, the first real snow of the winter is falling, blanketing the park across the street in a pure, untouched layer of white. It is incredibly beautiful and it is incredibly quiet. It has been 2 years since I deleted that bank transfer. I have not spoken a single word to my mother, my father, or my brother since the day I walked out of that downtown cafe. I don't follow their lives on social media. I don't ask extended relatives for updates. They are completely, irrevocably dead to me. People who haven't experienced profound family toxicity often struggle to understand this. They say things like, "But they are your blood," or "You only get one mother." They believe that sharing genetic material creates an unbreakable, sacred bond that must endure any level of abuse, manipulation, or theft. I am here to tell you that blood simply makes you related. Loyalty, respect, and unconditional care are what make you family. My parents demanded the ultimate loyalty from me while offering absolutely none in return. They viewed me not as a son to be nurtured, but as an asset to be exploited. When that asset became inconvenient, they tried to discard me. When they needed more, they tried to steal my future. I used to think that the worst thing in the world was to be alone. I spent my entire 20s terrified of losing my family, terrified of being alienated and isolated. I bought into the lie that a bad family was better than no family at all. I know better now. The worst thing in the world isn't being alone. The worst thing is being surrounded by people who make you feel completely invisible, who drain your spirit and your bank account, and who demand you thank them for the privilege of being used. I lost my childhood home. I lost my parents. I lost my brother. I lost thousands of dollars that I will never get back. But what I gained was infinitely more valuable. I gained my sanity. I gained my financial independence. I gained the ability to wake up in the morning without a pit of dread in my stomach, wondering what emergency I was going to be forced to pay for today. I bought my freedom. It cost me a massive piece of my heart, and it cost me the illusion of a loving family. But as I stand here looking at the snow fall over a life I built entirely for myself, with my own hands and my own name, I know the truth. Peace is the most expensive thing I have ever bought in my entire life. And I promise you, it was worth every single penny. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I know it was long, and I know it was heavy, but I hope this resonated with you in some way. Family dynamics can be incredibly complicated, and sometimes the hardest choices we have to make are the ones that save our own lives. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation? Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because staying was destroying you? Please, share your experiences down in the comments. I read every single one of them, and this community is a safe space for us to heal together. If you have watched this video all the way to this exact moment, you are part of a very special group. I like to call you the 1% Club. If you are still here, I want you to go down to the comments right now and type the letter W. W stands for winner. It is our secret code, a sign for me to recognize the winners, the amazing people who stayed with me until the very end and who understand the true value of walking away from toxicity to win back your life. If my story helped you, or if you just want to support this channel, please hit that like button, and make sure to follow and subscribe so we can keep sharing these journeys together. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next story.